Welcome. My name is Sid Cromanhook. I'm a partner at Album VC. Really excited today for what we think is kind of a momentous time for Silicon Slopes. We're all part of the Silicon Slopes community and really enthusiastic that we are coming to you live. We are socially distanced, 6 feet apart. We took precaution when we came in to use the hand sanitizer, and it's a little different. This is an empty room that we're looking at right now. There is nobody here. And so on one hand, we want to, with all of our fellow Utahns, convey the care that we feel for each other to be safe during this time, and also to together tiptoe back into life, or some of life as we know it. I'm really excited today. These happen to be friends, foremost, and you'll get to know them in just a minute. The title that we chose was Beyond the Twitter Bubble, what this all really looks like 3 months in. Chances are you've read something that did not resonate with you somewhere or heard something, and chances are you listened and heard somebody talk to their normal as something that seemed to resonate. And we hope that in what you hear today, you get a little dose of just that. So we will go around the panel and start with Andrea. Dre, if you could share with us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so Andrea, Dre for short. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Streamly, so it's a B2B SaaS platform. So I'm one of the tech nerds. And we streamline the deal desk process to essentially streamline your sales close process to get better deals across the finish line faster.
How long has your startup been around? Where are you guys at?
Ooh, just a little over a year. So it feels a lot longer than that in startup time for sure. But yeah, so we're still in the earlier stages for sure. But I've been in Silicon Slopes, my first career. I've been here for 8 or so years, so this feels like home.
That's right. And we were office mates at one point.
Yes,
so we actually, for the first bit of Streamly, had the pleasure of every day saying what's up, seeing each other in jam sessions, and Andrea has unmatched energy, I can tell you that.
Very sweet.
Mike?
It's good to see your face, even
Likewise.
though we're so far away from each other. My name is Mike P. I'm one of the founders at Homey. We're a real estate software business that facilitates the American dream. So we help people buy and sell homes, get a loan with the whole closing process. It's been a fun ride. We're disrupting a huge industry. We launched in March of 2016, and here we are in 3 geographies. So stoked to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks, Mike. And Lisa?
I'm Lisa Richards, and owner of Skin Boss LLC, which includes a physical skin spa in Provo, as well as an online business where we provide a store as well as consulting services to clients.
Awesome. So we're 3 months into this, and the question I want you to think about, I'm going to share some stats, is first of all, what was the most immediate impact to your business, to your customers? Like what was felt when this all really kind of dropped and fell out from under us? The statistics I want to share represent kind of a portion, a slice of our community in Silicon Slopes. Album has made 50 investments over the past 5 years, and we've compiled data over the last 3 months that we thought would be interesting to share, and then all the color can come from the panel here on what it's felt like kind of on the ground. So what we saw and what we've seen is that over half of the companies in our portfolio have had to make serious cuts to budget, including team and recasting what they thought they would do in revenue. A smaller percentage, about a quarter, actually have businesses that during this time have services that are in demand, and so they're accelerating plan. And that leaves about a quarter. So about a quarter then are left kind of watching very carefully and cautiously, like we all are, to see what life looks like when we kind of come back online and how. Related to that, nearly half of the portfolio applied for PPP to help kind of fill some of that gap. And about 80% of those received PPP. There was one company, incidentally, that received it and then decided, as we've seen some companies in the community decide to give it back. They didn't feel, when they kind of had the fullness of data and some time, they looked at it and said, you know what, there are others that could better use this. So that's what we've seen. What we want to know is, what have each of you seen? And maybe we can start with you, Mike, and then Lisa, and then Dre. Like, what has it been like for Homey? How have things changed?
It's a new normal for sure. I'll start with our employees. We have over 275 employees, 3 geographies, and being thoughtful and caring about their health, especially since real estate is is something that's done face-to-face, especially when you're buying a home. On the sell side, everything is automated. You do get a real estate agent, but you're never going to meet them in person. So thinking about how to follow the proper rules, and there was 3 or 4 weeks of just massive uncertainty. I think I worked more then, and I work more now with this work from home thing that's going on. But the safety of our customers and the safety of our employees was the most important thing. And then after that was assessing the health of the business, right? Understanding what our revenue opportunities are. We're super entrepreneurial. I mean, we're constantly adding new product lines, and the spirit of that entrepreneurship is kind of coming now because we're identifying new opportunities to generate new revenue. We did make cuts, not payroll cuts in terms of like slicing heads off, and that sounds horrible in terms of letting people go.
Yep.
But we did look at compensation, and that was cut because it was the prudent thing. It is the prudent thing to do. Cash is king right now.
How did your employees respond to that?
Most of them were on board. They knew it was coming, right? They knew it was the right thing to do, and they're all homies. They really believe in the mission that we're going after, and they know that it's the right thing to do. And we cut marketing budget as well, and G&A expenses. Obviously, travel went down to zero. But as we looked at those things, we knew that if we did this now, we would position the business to capture opportunity of growth, which is now what we're seeing. We also have homie loans, and interest rates are sub 3%. So we're seeing a huge refi boom. If we would have acted too early and unwisely, we wouldn't have that opportunity. And right now, I mean, we're behind about 5 or 10 loan officer hires because there's such a large demand, right? And given that everything is virtual, we're lucky enough that our business is positioned to thrive, but it's not easy, and we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Lisa.
Yeah, we're different in that it's a storefront and like a physical spa. We work in close proximity. I'm directly over as like practitioners. We're just over someone's face. And so we had to close. There was just no way. Initially, we were just kind of trying to gauge what the climate is. Are we going to have to close? But then it became, well, whether they tell us to close or not, there's just no safe way to do that. And then, their lifestyles changed. Schools let out. They're home. So everything just started falling through, everything fell through the cracks. So we closed the business. So then it's like, how do we make rent when we can't have revenue into a business that has been open just like less than 6 months ago?
Right.
So then we shift to, fortunately, in our industry, we already had an online portion where most people in my position were scrambling to, how do we do this online? But this is something I had developed over like 4 years of we do virtual consults, and we have an online store, and we have ways of like working with people beyond our reach of Utah. So that was the biggest help because we had to totally shift to relying online and seeing like, could we do this online? Like sitting down right when we close, I was just like seeing just all gray skies of like, well, this, like, how long can we survive? And sitting down with the accountant and going, this is how much money you have, this is how long you can survive. So like going on business life support of, if this is how much you have to make to float the whole business, like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Well, and I've got to interject here. So Lisa's my sister. Part of inviting her to this, we're like, don't you do the same hairdo today? We got to look a little different. Part of this, we don't talk too much business, but we have this time we're catching up on a lot of things, and she shares with me that she starts using some local software companies. And it was so embarrassing because they were companies that I'm invested in. I had never shared, and her comment was like, so why didn't you tell me there were businesses that could help me run my business? So share with us, in the spirit of adapting, and I think this is an interesting commentary too, and it sounds like, is the line Silicon Slopes began, and it evokes the notion of, Silicon Valley and pure tech, and I think credit to the Silicon Slopes community, it's a lot more than that now. And where tech stops and storefront and Main Street businesses start has become very blurred. And the truth is, if ever there was a time where we all had to find new and virtual ways to do things and conduct business and just life, now's that time. Tell us a little bit about that, Lisa, and then we'll jump to Dre, and I want to hear.
Because it does demonstrate that perfectly, because my business has totally benefited from these tech companies, which that's not my realm, but those in my industry tend to pull from what we only know traditionally, like how we market, how we're known, what we do. And this has leveraged us differently to pull from their strengths where I don't run that. So I brought in Podium before this started, and thank goodness, which I've told them, that totally changed my client communication, because if we didn't have that in place, I had no way to sort of just conveniently reach out to people. We're like, hey, you want to like pick up an order? We'll leave it on the doorstep, or we'll leave it. And like some people came in and like walked in the spa and grabbed it. We sanitized things, you know, like we had communication between the online virtual consults. We could run payments through that. Just so both those local and not local, like the Podium allowed us to have better client communication, because email and phone number wasn't going to be working the same way. And then it was like my accountant's like, you know, we apply for PPP in the bank after 2 weeks, and I follow up and they're like, yeah, we don't even have this, like, we don't have a system for this right now, so you're better off finding someone else. And I'm like,
a lot of people actually experience that. You aren't alone.
Yeah, so it's like, oh,
shocking.
great, after all the paperwork and stuff. And so then my accountant's like, yeah, we should go through Divvy. I've heard they're pushing it through. I do that, push it through. Like, so those were the companies that the tech companies had some insight and the ability to just like pull in and do it faster and better, because they kind of operate that way. So most people in a spa industry would not think, I'm going to benefit from these tech companies, but it's what got us moving in the right direction.
That's awesome. Well, Dre sits in an interesting spot, because Dre, you know, similar to Lisa, like just knowing you both, you know, from kind of a starting and really early in the journey. Of course, you are deeply on the tech side. How is it for Streamly? How has it been?
Well, I mean, first of all, I love the title of this panel. I mean, Beyond the Twitter Bubble. I think that's so interesting, because everyone is, everyone wants to be optimistic, which is great, right? And you know, downturn is the time to innovate, which we all have, and I don't want to knock that. But the truth is, like, it sucked. Like, when all of this started happening, it wasn't fun for anybody, right? And I think especially where we sit in tech, like startups, yes, we have less costs. So a bigger company probably was scrambling more with people and like rent and just all the costs associated with running a bigger business exist. But startups are also so fragile, right? And we were actually planning on starting to fundraise in, I think at the end of March is when I had it on my calendar. So I had a trip planned out to San Francisco, and of course that got canceled. And you know, the first thing I did, I think like everyone else, I had my moment of panic. I'm like, all right, but I did that secretly and privately, which maybe isn't the best thing to do. But really what I had to focus on right away was, all right, how do I make sure, for a startup, a venture-backed startup, how do I make sure that we can punt this fundraise down the road and not lose one single head? Now, again, I know a lot of companies don't have the luxury of doing that, but for me, and hopefully I can just openly say this, I stopped paying myself, right? I stopped paying for certain marketing expenses. I stopped paying for things that were not as critical as our people. And I vowed to my team that we weren't going to let anyone go.
So you haven't had to let anybody go today. You haven't been paying yourself since this started, is that right?
Yeah.
So impressive.
But I mean, I know I have the luxury of doing that because I'm a smaller company. So I definitely realize that. But you know, there are pros and cons of having a startup, and again, we have less costs, but I mean, we're so fragile, right? So luckily we're at a spot now where we pushed our fundraise off, and we have, to be honest, our pipeline has never looked better. And that's just because we had to pivot our messaging, which, you know, we can talk about a little bit later, but yeah, where there's a will, there's a way, right? And we found a way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna share an experience I had a few days ago, which informed part of this. I had kind of a different idea of what I thought might be interesting and useful, and then like reality was staring me in the face of like, this is what somebody's very viscerally kind of sharing. And so the question I'm gonna have that I want you to think on is, what has been for you or a teammate the lowest low? Like, what does it kind of look like? So here's the experience. I get a late call, and it's a 10 p.m. call from CEO of a local company, and his comment is, tell me really what founders in your portfolio are saying. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He goes, no, because I'm seeing things online of like, 100% of the CEOs I talk to are ready to just stay working from home. And it was a lot of the like killing it, weathering it, you know, kind of a lot of this hyperbole that we see that, look, we want to celebrate the wins, but we all know some of the pitfalls of the overly, you know, optimistic view sometimes when it falls short or far short of reality. His comment was, I am going crazy. I don't think my employees are working, not because they're lazy, but because they're just not used to working from home. I'm tempted to start driving my car by employees' houses to actually see if I can catch them in the yard during work hours to see if they're really working. And it was just real frustration. And my comment was, hold up, like, this is more common than not, from my perspective. But with that said, like, what has it looked like? Is it, hey, I think we appreciate words like disruption and something cataclysmic change, reinventing ourselves. But the other side to it is there are some things, like, I don't know, at one point we were all hunters and gatherers, and Mike was like, hey, I figured out how to lean some wood up against this cliff, and we can go under it, and it protects us from the elements. And then we start, like, chatting, and Lisa's like, oh, we can, like, hang out in here. And then Andrea starts a fire, and we're like, oh, it turns out, like, having a little domicile to do stuff, whether it's hanging out with your family or working with people, actually is a good invention. Like, I don't think it's going away tomorrow. But anyway, back to the question. Like, what has been? He shared his low. It was a real frustration. I've kind of felt and virtually seen more tears, I think, during this time than typical times. What has it been like for each of you? Let's start again with Dre, actually, and let's just reverse kind of backward.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that a lot actually last week in one of my highs, right? I was thinking about, like, wow, this is a roller coaster. And everyone knows, like, startup life is a roller coaster already, but add a pandemic, it makes it a little bit crazier. And I feel like it can change so quickly too. I'm gonna share two, if that's okay, and I'll go fast.
Please.
But so personally, I think that's important to realize that outside of being entrepreneurs, we're humans, dads, moms, maybe, dog mom.
Love it.
And as a single person, like in my 20s, it's super lonely. I took social distancing very, very seriously, and I think you and I were texting about it. You asked me how I was doing, which I appreciated, and I was like, I'll be honest, dude, I'm super lonely. And that might be a little embarrassing to admit. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of friends, but when you're social distancing, you have yourself and your dog. Sounds depressing.
And it's exacerbated there. I mean, I just read, there was I can't remember her name, professor at BYU, who 2 years ago had reported that loneliness is like the equivalent to us as 15 cigarettes a day. And she just did in March an interview with Sheryl Sandberg, where Sheryl was suggesting all these ways to combat loneliness, because loneliness can be equally lethal to us. So look, there's a difference between somebody who's single and somebody, who does have other people, in the house, right?
No, totally. And it was funny because I was talking to one of my other friends who is in a similar role as me in a larger company, and she has many kids, and it's just different experiences. One is not better or worse, but I remember telling her about how lonely I was feeling, and she mentioned I would kill to have some alone time because she was stuck in a house with like 5 kids. And so it was a very humanizing exchange. Like, we didn't talk about business for an hour, and we just talked about how we really wanted, like, the grass was greener on the other side a little bit. Like, I would have loved to hang out with her kids for a few hours, and I'm sure she would have loved to just be at home where I was. So that's the personal one, and I know that I'm not the only one in that position, and I really
100%.
Well, and I really tried hard during quarantine, and even now, since we're not really seeing each other, and when we're 6 feet apart, to really engage in those online communities and show up, with your camera on in Zoom versus not on. So there are obviously ways to combat that, but professionally, it was when everything started being very real and people just stopped responding. So this is, maybe just specifically to tech, but I would be curious how this, translates outside of tech. But everyone had that moment of panic. And unfortunately, it wasn't a moment, it was a few weeks. And during those few weeks of panic, some companies did it better, or maybe faster is the better word, and they were able to get their house in order and get back to some sort of, normal is the wrong word, but some sort of like operating in a different kind of way. And other companies were in that panic mode. They lived in that panic mode a little bit longer, and you guys probably have seen that. The prospects and the customers that we work with are amazing, best customers in the world. The prospects that we were trying to talk to, we had a great pipeline, and all of a sudden we were just like ghosted. Now, as a single girl, I never get ghosted, Sid. So, it's really weird to get ghosted by prospects.
What is this new thing?
What does ghosted mean?
I know, right? Oh, ghosted, for those of you who don't know. No, but really, I would send an email out or a follow-up, and I would get nothing. Or the standard, because of COVID-19, we're pushing this meeting out to a month or two. I got that so many times. And now, as entrepreneurs, we're so used to being rejected, like we are. But it hurt a different kind of way because it wasn't the normal kind of rejection. It was because of this pandemic. So unfortunately, like I said, it wasn't a moment. It was a few weeks. We didn't get anything. I didn't have one demo. And at that moment, as a small startup, I was like, what? How do you move on from this? And one day when I feel more brave, I'll show you the email that I sent. But I was trying everything. There was an email I sent that was just purely gifts of me. I made gifts of myself. Hi, I'm Dre. I was doing finger guns. It's so embarrassing. And I sent it to 80 people. I'll show it to you someday. But 2 people responded, which is great. But I was desperate, really, to try anything. And then luckily after a few weeks, it was probably about 3 weeks of that. That was, and we can talk about the highs later because there are highs. Like I said, we have a great pipeline now. But for those 3 weeks of panic mode in our prospect base, where we got nothing, it was the worst kind of rejection. So that was a low, and I can still feel it.
I want to see those gifts.
Oh, they're bad.
We can laugh at them at a later date.
Yeah, it's too soon,
A little too soon. Lisa and then Mike.
I'm a mom, but I was really into my kids were all in school and in their home, and dad's working from home, but then I've got to I am focused on this business has to survive. And so I felt a little bit how are we assuming every parent is, we have a stay-at-home parent? Because thought I was the only mom who wasn't making sourdough and tie-dye. Because everyone's I'm
You didn't make that dress?
No.
You didn't make that dress?
I had to buy my tie-dye because people were I'm so excited for the projects. We're doing, showing the most amazing ways they're homeschooling. And I'm just try to do your work. I don't even know how to log on. I don't know. See you guys. It was just, so I'm feeling kind of this failure on the personal side of I can't afford to put all in on their school right now. But then I got thrown some extra curveballs where I'm seriously, COVID was crisis. And then my landlord wanted to, I don't know if he was in panic mode, decided he wanted to renegotiate the terms of our lease that was not in my favor. And so that led to a legal matter, which I felt I don't have time or money to be throwing in legal matters right now, but I had to confront that. And then I had to, as looking at the financials, looking where my time is spent in the business, I had worked really hard it was 8 months previous to that to get a working relationship in a medical office. And there was a lot to get that to work out. But then as we both shut down, it came clear of I can no longer afford to have that relationship. I've got to cut that tie and focus just on the things that will sustain my business. Because that was a fun type of why not explore that? Let's see this. But I didn't have the freedom to explore that anymore. And so cutting that tie was not fun, so hard decisions.
I can remember a call where you kind of shared some of that gentleman's comments that were pretty condescending.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have to move out of Big Brother mode to just, well, you got this, you got this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa.
You said a technical term. It's this sucked. It does. It did. It sucks a little bit less, right? I'm the eternal optimist. Ask anyone that knows me.
Well, since now, 6 years ago, for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
right. And this is the time for me where the word courage comes to mind, and then trusting the team. Right, we have a great team at Homey, and I'm sure you guys also have a great team, but we spent a lot of time crafting a team together and being vulnerable with each other and with our employee base, and not having this pretendo story that we're not hurting inside. The CEO that called you, the things that come to mind, I don't think that would happen at Homey. I don't even think someone would think about driving to an employee's house to check up on him. It's just not kosher. It's not cool. And we don't worry about that. If I'm going to drive over to an employee's house, it's to give them some cookies and to see how they're doing. That's kind of, at Homey, sometimes we say we're a culture. We don't have a culture. And that is a high degree of trust, right? And the team also extends to my wife at home. So I empathize that you don't have someone, right? Because it is hard, and I always look at the silver lining, right? I have not been home for 3 months straight in over 3 years. That's a blessing, man, because I get to see my kids, and I'm taking a little bit of lunch off at home to play with them, and that's been super splendid for me. And being able to do that, now, am I working more? Yes, because I don't know, there's not a transition from the office to the house, and I need to manage that a little bit better, right? Because we do need some self-care time. But the lows were, the uncertainty for me drives me crazy, right? But then something else in my brain kicks on. It's like, I started saying this saying around the office, and it's pretty funny, or on Zoom calls, I say let's kick COVID in the mouth. Not mouth, in the mouth, right? Like, let's just go stomp on it and see what we can create. Yeah. And some people share that sentiment, and it's really awesome to do that. But the lows were, just the certainty, and the unemployment rate is super crazy, right? But fundamentally, we believe that it's a health crisis creating some financial rippling effect. I lived through 2008. That's where the story of Homie comes from. And I've seen darkness straight in the face. And one of my board members asked me, how are you feeling? And I think that was a wonderful question. And I honestly said, I've seen worse. I've been in worse. I've been in that mode of desperation, losing a job, losing homes, your shelter. I've been that. And this is freaking scary because it's a health crisis, and the unknowables are just frustrating. But I've been in a position before, and this isn't it. I've been there before, and this is nothing like it. And that gives me an opportunity to kind of wake up with a smile and go help out my other homies.
Appreciate that. On that note, thinking about having been through something, and just by virtue of you all navigating your startup, I want you to think of what you would say to young Hispanic kids in our community. Let me give context. People are like, where's that coming from? Huh? What? So 14% of Utah is Hispanic. 1/3 of all COVID cases are borne by the Hispanic community. For a lot of reasons, because they're in service industries, they have to get back to work, they're compromised there. Living conditions could be different, and we know that socioeconomic situations, your ability to jump in the hot tub and walk the half-acre spread is not shared by every Utahn. So I want, and those young kids, they bear some of just the unfortunate reality that they could be the breakers of, that some of you, maybe all of us in a way, were a part of. So I want you to think of what you would say to them, because here's the truth, is Silicon Slopes has a lot of faces, and we see some faces more often than others, by no fault of those faces or the organization. It's part of Utah. We came from where we came from. But the ability for us to continually, whether it's gender, which folks have championed that beautifully and continue to make strides, whether it's, people of color and all shades of brown, For me, speaking personally, I remember a summer spent in Tucson, Arizona, and it was all people that looked moderately more like me in positions of authority and power. And for me, it just mentally created something new, which was like, oh, there's somebody who looks kind of like you, and they're there. And so knowing where you each just are, knowing how some of you grew up, what do you say to the young kids who have a very different reality right now, who may not even have thought of tech, who have their own limitations that are kind of ossified in some of their truth? What do you say to them at a time like this? And maybe that can lead into your biggest victory so far. You've shared with us, you've all been a bit vulnerable with sharing with us some of the hard parts of this. Let's start with Mike, and then we'll go Dre, Lisa.
I love this question, man. I love the opportunity that's in front of us. I love the opportunity to be a role model, if we can call ourselves that. I believe in education through and through. And education in a sort of a different slice of it, whether you go to college and get formally educated and get a master's and all this other stuff.
Where did you grow up and how, Mike?
So I grew up in South Central LA, pretty rough neighborhood, and I was lucky enough to get bussed out from the inner city to the San Fernando Valley, which is a completely different reality for me.
Did all of your siblings have that opportunity?
No, just me.
How has it changed?
There's a
You guys-
difference. I
Yep.
mean, I grew up, I was an ESL kid. Spanish was my first language. My older sister has a heavier accent than I do. My kid sister, she went to a private university in Denver, right? So she got a car at 16. I had to work. I worked since I was 8. I have worked and gone to school since I was 8 years young. And that hustle comes from my mother, and she was an immigrant. She came over, and her biggest thing was education. She sacrificed so much for her kids because she knew that there was an opportunity on the other side. And for her to sacrifice everything, it's my obligation. And maybe the second conversation that you and I had is how can we help our Latin community? How can we expose them? How can we remove that ceiling that, by the way, is only there if they see it, right? And I think that's something that it's a blessing to have that opportunity and to be honest and real, and they're gonna have to work, right? They're gonna have to remove themselves from those situations. If I wasn't on a bus for an hour and a half each way, I would have been a gang member. I would have been in drugs and in crime, but it was because of that, and again, it goes back to education. It's that opportunity. My face is always in a book. I'm always trying to learn something new and then apply it. And then if it doesn't work, go back to the drawing board and talk to other people and share experiences. So what I would tell to a young Latin boy is you can do it. You gotta believe that you can do it, but you got to put the work in, right? And education is the key. It's going to unlock so many things, right? If you think about a bunch of professionals that are minorities and women and of different color and creed, education, some way or another, has shaped them, right? Whether it's formal or informal, right? And it's that drive to persevere. And is it harder for us? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, right? But does that give me the opportunity to wake up and work a little bit harder and take on that challenge and not hold a grudge on it? Absolutely, right? So,
Thanks, Mike.
I love
Dre.
that. That was great. Yeah, I mean, so I was born in Bolivia, which you know, and we came to the U.S. when I was a kid, and we came for that American dream, right? And like that, when I hear the word opportunity, I always go back to my roots, because we came for an opportunity, a vague opportunity, just an opportunity to live a better life. And so similar to what you were saying, like, I do feel like that obligation as well, not just to my parents, but to myself, to prove to myself, not everyone else, that I can do hard things, I can do big things. And you know what, your point about people not seeing people that look like them hits so close to home. Because growing up, especially, I mean, I grew up in Provo. After we went from Bolivia straight to Provo, Utah. I didn't see another brown kid for a minute, you know, and I didn't see CEOs that looked like me. I didn't see people in power that looked like me. And so I pretty much had to create my own path, and it was difficult, and I think some of the advice I would give, you know, young Latinos, it would be to find your tribe, right? It is because I had a lot of people help along the way. I had to go find that help, of course, because, you know, my parents, I had working parents, so I didn't really, you know, I didn't have a very normal, like, childhood, but not having someone, not seeing people that look like you is hard. And so when I'm having a hard day, and this might sound cheesy, but, like, I think of my little sisters. I think about how I am that person for them, and that's so cool to me. Like, that's so cool to me. I've always wanted, and this might sound cheesy, but I've always wanted someone like me to look up to when I was younger. Not in that sense, but more like look.
We get it. We get it.
And so when I have those hard days, I'm like, what would Emma think? Like, Emma is going to be better than me, because she has someone who she can, like, I don't know, see that, hey, if she could do it, I could do it, and I could do it better. And she can, right? Yeah. Or Natalia or Camilla. But yeah, it's so interesting, because I think I touched on this already, but going back to, you know, proving to yourself that you can do it, like any young Hispanic boy or girl out there, go find your tribe. Like, let them help you. People want to help, right? I think just the fact that the four of us are getting together, we're helping each other. And I think that's so important, because there is opportunity. And yeah, the cards are stacked against you as a person of color sometimes. I think it would be naive to not admit that. But doesn't mean I can stop you. If anything, prove to yourself you can do it, right? Yeah. And so, I don't know.
Thank you. Love it. Lise, I was joking on the phone, we're the white Canos here. So we were raised by our mother. We were raised by our mother, who's full-blooded Mexican. You know, we're proud of our heritage on both sides. But specifically, Lise, when you think of young kids in that construct, what do you say to them?
I think a lot of it is more on the principle, like, of their personal values. So, granted, it was like raised in Utah, and our circumstance was not so much based on the ethnicity, but a lot of the economic disadvantage. And so, what I see is what you gain from that is your asset. So, whether that's in a Latin American family, they see really hardworking parents who don't get all the literal fruits of their labors. Is like, I have one employee who she was raised in a really difficult, like, socioeconomic situation, but what she's gained out of that, she has no sense of being less than anyone. She's got, like, the most tenacity, and that's why she's valuable to me, is because she says, from day one, I was like, took her on kind of a part-time, let's see how you do, and when I said, okay, let's see if you can do, she goes, it's okay, I'm a fast learner, and everything's been like, whether she actually knows how to do it or not, is like, I'll learn, I'll figure it out, or if I say, I'm looking for someone, she goes, I'd like to do it, like, I was opening a new position I'd like someone to maybe bridge in social media. She's like, I want to do your social media too. Can I try it? Like, she's opportunistic. So I think it's seizing all the opportunities and not limiting yourself by seeing, like, sort of the stereotypes of, oh, like, I could go somewhere where they need someone who speaks Spanish, or, like, it's not limited to that. It's, I can do it based on, I've got, like, a little more fire in my belly because we live off of, like, this girl lives off of survival because she literally didn't have a lot of parental guidance, and she had to have survival skills of how she was going to leverage herself. And so it's taking those skills to get in the right position. So maybe, yeah, your parent doesn't know a guy from the country club who's going to hook you up into a sweet job and internship. So instead, it's just putting yourself in the forefront and, like, no reason I can't do it. And take all those, like, values and feelings you have inside to work for your benefit.
Love it, love it. Well, look, that's probably a wrap. I want to, thank each of you. You know, we're friends foremost. We're part of a community. We're a slice of community that has a lot of different shades that are only growing, and it's something I think we all take, pride in. And also, we look forward to, in Utah, finding this like our safe way to be together while we're still a little bit apart and short of being fully together again. So thank you for watching, listening. Thanks to the panel.
Thanks, Helmy. Appreciate it.